structure real quick for both the benefit of the judges and is it Jerry? I'm not sure. Have you judged yet already today?
Yeah, just once.
Okay, so you kind of know the structure. You guys have 25 minutes. You'll tell us who we are in terms of our role here today, and in the first 10 to 15 minutes after they're done, we will give questions in that role. So if we're the board, we're going to still pretend we're the board and ask questions like we're the board. And then after that, for the next 10 to 15 minutes, we'll give you feedback, just constructive feedback from our own perspective, and take that board hat off. So everybody good with the structure and the timing?
Yes. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And do you want a 5-minute warning, a 1-minute warning? Are you good on time? Do you just, there's a clock up here?
Yeah, we have a
guys are good on
there.
time?
I figured.
Okay, perfect.
Nice.
Okay, so whenever you're ready, I think I've never been so on time in my whole life. We would actually start exactly at 11 o'clock. But if you guys are ready, you probably would rather start than stand there and stare at us.
Quick
for
question.
another couple
So
minutes.
is explain to you all what your position is part of our time or not?
Oh, we're supposed to introduce ourselves.
Oh, you're right. I gotta do that. You're right. I just did that. So I have a sheet. We're gonna introduce ourselves. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then I think the other two groups that I have judged already today worked it into their presentation. But if you want to tell us ahead of time, just say, "Hey, you're the board" or whatever. I'm totally fine with that.
I think that would work better.
If that works better for you guys,
Okay.
absolutely
What do you guys
free
think?
to do that.
Yes, I agree.
Perfect.
Okay. Do you want to tell us who we are?
Absolutely. You guys are the board of directors of Shein, the fast fashion company.
Got it.
And we're a consulting company that you guys contacted
Okay.
regarding packaging.
Okay, regarding packaging. Okay. Now, I'm going to read the instructions. Welcome to the 25-minute presentation. You will adopt an identity and assign an identity to us as judges. You will begin your presentation and will present to us without interruption. After your presentation, we will ask questions within role. After the Q&A, judges will provide feedback on your presentation. This is a blind judging competition. At no time should you reference your university, just your team name. And same goes for the judges. When you introduce yourself, you can say your business affiliation, but don't say what university you may have come from.
Okay.
So that we don't have any biases. Okay, so
I'm Chiki Bianco, and I work in the television industry, and I have a background in television production, and I'm currently in standards and practices, which is video content compliance for government regulations and also for company policies. So that's what I do for a living.
Jerry Alkind at distribution. I took a small company actually and stopped manufacturing and got into more distribution and then sold to a conglomerate. And then now I have real estate that I work with.
Ernie Roberts. I work in in consumer electronics. I've been in this field for about 15 years now. Started the department and built it, from there.
And I'm Kendra Jones. I am the Chief Legal and Sustainability Officer for Exxon America.
Amazing. Perfect.
Beautiful.
Amazing.
Do we just get started?
Yep.
Perfect.
Go right ahead. And I gotta start.
Oh.
Go for it.
Hello, my name is Joaquin Martinez, and I'm a member of 3AJ Consulting. You, as the board of directors of Shein, contacted our consulting company to discuss and research the issue of the packaging which you use today, which mainly involves virgin plastic bags that are delivered to customers. Based on our research, we built this presentation in order to provide you with a solution. Our presentation will be divided in 6 parts involving addressing the problem, discussing a solution, and then giving you with legal, financial, ethical advantages, and then wrapping it up with a quick conclusion. So without further ado, let's delve into the problem. As you guys have identified, there are 2 aspects that are problematic with using plastic packaging, like the one you use today to send to customers, and that is that it is not sustainable with the environment, as well as it does not keep up with the legislation that's going on around the world. When it concerns sustainability, you're well aware of the negative effects of plastic, especially virgin plastic, for such a broad scale. As you know, between 184 and 213 million tons of gases are produced just in the refinements of plastics, which is just one of the stages of plastic production. Between 19 and 23 million tons of plastic leak into bodies of water, which tend to damage marine ecosystems and ends up in the water we consume every day. It is also important to think about the end of the life of the plastic bags which you utilize and in their disposal. And we wanted to acknowledge that 2 to 4 million tons of plastics are sent to the global south, to countries that, because of lacking resources, are not able to deal with plastics properly and end up burning the plastics, releasing toxins that are detrimental to the poorest populations of the world, causing diseases that are very difficult to deal for populations like that. However, there's not only a sustainable problem to this, to the packaging which you use today, there's also a legal problem that's going on. As countries around the world and states here in the United States have moved towards solving the issue of single-usage plastics that are reused in forks, knives, but also packaging. For example, we have California Senate Bill 54, which my partner will discuss in the legal section of our presentation. However, this does not only happen in America, as even Europe, India, China, great countries that have a lot of consumers of Sheen are implementing this sort of legislation, which makes it difficult for a company that uses plastic so thoroughly. However, we're not here to reprimand the company at all. We're here to acknowledge as well its story of success. Sheen was able to revolutionize the fashion industry by moving away from storefronts at the mall to storefronts at people's homes, delivering bags that have their name. That is ultimately the storefront, which represents your company. And we want you, as well as you do, to obviously want to move and revolutionize further with your sustainable practices and be able to move towards a better solution than the plastic so far. When it comes to the solution that we're ultimately here for, what we want is for you to partner with a leading company in packaging solutions called EcoPackables. EcoPackables is a company leading in polymer science development, as they use their latest science to produce plastic-like bags that are actually made of compostable materials that can be properly disposed without negative effects to the environment, and that do follow the legislation previously addressed. Moreover, EcoPackables is a company that already works at a very large scale, working with larger companies such as Champion and Saks Outfit within the fashion industry, which is the one that you would probably be most interested in. However, they also even work with companies like Nestle. What's great about EcoPackables and why we're so excited to present it to you is that this company focuses on companies like you, large companies that send plastic bags to their customers. We have here the bag where the clothes are in, as well as the mail bag to which the clothes are delivered. There are options of customizing it, so the storefront, and it can, you can put Sheen and deliver it to people's homes and represent your brand in a better light. However, obviously we would love for every company to switch to biodegradable packaging all at once. That would be the ideal world, but this is not a solution that's able to be done today, even for large corporations like Sheen that do have the resources. We wanted, therefore, to propose not only a product that you should implement, but also an implementation plan that begins where you are currently. Currently, Sheen is using reused plastics in Europe and the UK, following the legislation there. And we believe that the first step would be to move to reuse plastics like the ones used in Europe in the areas that, such as California, that are pushing companies to move away from single-usage plastics. However, this legislation, because of their complexities, overall require even more move beyond just reused plastics towards compostable solutions that are able to be properly disposed of. And so phase 3 would involve starting to move towards using the EcoPackables packaging in states like California. And finally, phase 4 would involve looking beyond and seeing how we can implement further this solution into the general supply chain of the company. Now Now with the solution provided, we can talk about its legal advantages.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Neda Benicio. I'm here today to talk about why Shein should shift from the single-use plastics to biodegradable alternatives. First, it's important to note that this is not a mere suggestion to make the company look more eco-friendly, but it is a strategic move to keep the company free of any legal liabilities in the future and also capitalize on any financial incentives that might come from this change. So with legislations like SB 54 that actually mandate companies like Shein to start using compostable materials or recyclable materials by 2034, Shein has to adapt right away. So exactly what is SB 54? SB 54, or Plastic Pollution Prevention and Packaging Producer Responsibility Act, is a legislation that is groundbreaking because it shifts the plastic pollution responsibility from the consumer to corporations like Shein, and its main objective is to reduce the overall amount of plastic pollution in the state of California. And methods of reduction would include shifting the materials used in packaging, and of course shifting to reusable or refillable alternatives. And most importantly, it is to ensure that all materials covered under SB 54, which are way broader than plastic, to be whether recyclable or compostable by 2032. And if a company decides to not be fully compliant, they would have to face up to $50,000 of penalties per infraction per day after 30 days of the first notification. And right now, you guys might be asking me, how is a Singaporean company going to be held liable in the US with American laws? So even though Shein is a company from Singapore, it has deep roots within American soil. It has made huge investments, having offices in Los Angeles, Washington, and Philadelphia, in which they run all the operations of the American consumer market for Shein. They run the marketing strategies, customer service as well. They also have warehouses in Vienna and California, in which they package and ship all the items bought from here, and if they're not in stock in the US, they would be shipped from China. But with this being said, with the doctrine of minimum contacts, a foreign company's liability within American soil would be determined to the extent of business activities and the amount of activities they have in the US. And since Shein has deep roots within American soil, they would be able to be held liable in American courts, subject to US laws, because of the substantial business activities they do have in the country. And SB 54 is just one of many other legislations being passed around the globe to restrict the use of single-use plastics. And Shein, as a huge international corporation, should be aware and should be complying with all its regulations. For example, we have the European Union Directive on Single-Use Plastics that limits and pretty much bans the use of single plastics in the EU, and it's being incrementally implemented since 2019. Then we have the Indian's ban on single-use plastics that has limited the production, importation, and disposal of single-use plastics since 2019 as well. And finally, we have the China's national sword policy that has been limiting that has banned 24 types of solid waste in China incrementally, and one of them being plastic, single-use plastics. And why is this so important? Is because all of these policies actually show that governments around the world are setting a very serious tone on greener production practices, and Shein should get ahead of this and adapt right away. So going with eco-packable is not only about compliance, it's also financially savvy. Governments around the world are providing tax breaks, financial aids, and financial assistance for companies trying to go green. And for example, in the US, we have green loans, which are loans that could be used to pay and finance greener practices. In these loans, they have lower interest rates and favorable repayment terms. And in many parts of the globe, we also have rebates and recovery programs that might even repay for the whole investment in switching for these greener practices. In California, for example, we have the California Recycling Market Development Zone, which provides financial aid, green loans, and technical assistance for companies that are trying to have greener practices. For example, Shein does have a huge warehouse here in California that would be applied to as well. So with all that being said, it's easy to say that if Shein does choose to go with eco-packables, Shein would have a great advantage staying ahead of legislation and, of course, enjoying all the financial incentives that might come with it. Now I'm going to pass it over to my colleague to explain the financial aspects of the presentation.
Good morning. I'll first start off with thanking you all for being here from your busy schedules. My name is Armin Kazuri, and I will be discussing the financial aspects of this situation, and more particularly why it's definitely a great time to transition right now in relation to the revenue, your customers, considering who they are and what their focuses are on when it comes to apparel, the apparel industry, and why overall financially this is viable to take that first step forward into going in a more sustainable manner of packaging. So in relation to the yearly revenue, it's definitely something important that you should know. Of course, when the company started back in 2016, they're not going to have $1 billion in sales. That's a given. However, as you can see throughout the years, they have been increasing their sales drastically. And once we hit 2019, they were right above $1 billion and only increasing. It definitely isn't something, if you may be concerned in regards to 2021 and 2018, why it didn't increase more than the previous year. That's just not a concern. When a company expands, expenses go higher and such aspects. However, in the last 3 years, we can see it went up from $5.9 billion in revenue up to $7 billion and going up to $7.3 billion. Now, these are not exact numbers. These are a close to accurate estimation on their revenues throughout the last years. That's just so you all know it's not an exact number. So Shein's average customer is something that, as being part of the company, you guys should definitely take into account when making this change. So Shein's average customer, they pay $100 per month, which is significantly higher than the average U.S. woman that spends on clothing. The average U.S. woman spends on average $545 a year just on clothing. And if you try to take into consideration the average of $100, that's almost 60% higher than what the average individuals pay. And that's something important because considering that you guys are focusing on the whole entire apparel industry towards, men, women, from shirts to pants and so forth, you do have many loyal customers and they do value the company as a whole. So next we're going to be talking about their SKU, also known as their stock keeping unit, which is also their retail price in the United States. This is their average retail price in the USA. However, do not get confused with their retail price and stock keeping unit because it isn't the same for every single company. However, for Shein, it is $14. So on average in the United States, the price for packaging per product is going to be 10% of 10 to 20% of the product's price. This would come in a range between $1.40 and $2.80. However, when it comes to using eco-packables, it will be about a 9-inch by 12-inch bag that we do recommend, and that is fully compostable and biodegradable. And therefore, we are moving towards a more sustainable method of packaging. For 900 units, it will be at about $465. However, Shein does ship 1 million packages per day worldwide. This does not mean they will be only using eco-packables, but it does make an initiative that they should change because if they do not change, this could cause future financial strains such as the ones that Andre was stating in regards to the SB 54 legislation in the state of California, as well as the regulations that are being made in India and China and other countries. So this would also mean that eco-packables does value their clients. Just like Joaquin mentioned that they do have Nestle, they do have Champion and Saks Off Fifth, along with many other big brands such as Ted Baker. So they want to build a long-term relationship with the company. They aren't looking for a short-term, selling the package and they, move on and then move into another company. They're looking for a long-term relationship that they can build on to each other, not just benefit the one company that's using that. So this would bring the new price per package down to $1.60 from $1.94. And like I said, these aren't exact numbers. So you may ask, why do the change now? So 52% of Shein customers in a survey that was done with over 5,000 people was said that they do actually care for the environment, and this is a brand that not only they want to continue buying products from, but they want to see that initiative on the change to moving into a more sustainable method of packaging and operations. 67% actually do state that they are willing to pay more and actually take the hit so they can get a more environmentally sustainable packaging for their product. And paying that extra dime for a customer, sometimes for many customers, for example like H&M and Zara, they aren't willing to pay. They go to the store, they don't have loyal and valuable customers that will stick with the brand. However, when a customer comes out and says, I am willing to pay more for your product so we can move into a more environmentally sustainable manner, that should mean something to you all. 62% actually do mention that they wear this disposable clothing at least 10 times or more. Considering that Shein is a brand that advertises on a one and done basis where you wear it once and you continue with the fashion in the modern day. So, that's something that you should value, because you can see that your customers are valuing this environmentally based aspect, because they know if they wear that piece of clothing, such as a shirt, t-shirt, pants, or so forth, they will be polluting the environment more. And that's something that they do not want to work towards. So I will now be passing it on to my colleague, and he will be discussing more of the ethical concerns in relation to this.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chiduzia Eje, and I'll be talking about the ethical and sustainable advantages of having eco-packables employed under Shein. So first off, we'll start with the current environmental concerns with Shein. It has been accused as being one of the leading causes of microplastic pollution in the fast fashion industry. And currently, right now, their distribution is done through Ziploc plastic bags, specifically named virgin plastic bags. And they are an estimate to distribute to over 220 countries globally. And this is an ethical consideration that needs to be taken into account with a one-use plastic shipping. Their current carbon footprint is close to being emitted to 6.3 million tons of carbon dioxide year-round through the use of the polyesters derived from not only just the product, but also the packaging itself, the virgin plastic itself. So the effects of the virgin plastic packaging. Currently, on average, in terms of just plastic packaging in general, 14 million tons of plastic end up in the ocean annually, and 2 to 4 million tons end up in the global south. Now, due to the amount in the global south, they try and get rid of it by any means necessary, and this leads to the burning of plastics, as mentioned earlier. But the problem is that this creates a lot of problems for the environment, such as burning plastics release toxic chemicals such as dioxin, which is a cancer-causing chemical. Along with this, the plastic and microplastic pollution has a great effect on people as well. And this can include oxidative stress, metabolic disorders, and even can affect reproductive development. So Shein already has current pledges towards sustainability, and they have said that they are going to try their best to reduce their greenhouse gases by 25% by 2030. Along with this, their packaging, they have issued that they will contain 50% preferred materials such as the eco packages, biodegradable materials by 2030 as well. But in reality, these goals are not being met currently. As I stated earlier, 6.3 million tons of carbon dioxide are being released into Earth's atmosphere, and it's even been noted that they're at a 45% higher than agreed UN target for their carbon dioxide release annually. Along with this, in general, by 2050, it's been anticipated that the fashion industry will have up to 25% of the world's carbon budget, and this is a big issue as it will make it one of the most polluting industries, second only to that of the oil industry itself. So, Shein's current growth to sustainability. As stated before, they have committed to sustainable goals, and they are now making steps towards reaching these said goals. Right now, they've begun partnering with sustainable practices, and one of the most notable ones is the Apparel Impact Institute, which was in June 2022, and that was to employ 7.6 million with the Apparel Impact Institute. Their other current partners are the Textile Exchange, the Mekong Club, the United Nations for Global Compact, the Queen of Ra Partnership of Unsold Clothing, the World Circular Textile Days, American Apparel and Footwear, the California Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Indiana Chamber of Commerce. So you might ask, how is EcoPackables the solution to sustainable efforts? EcoPackables is a biodegradable packaging system, and this will completely eliminate microplastic pollution as well. Right now, as stated before, 1.8 billion tons of carbon dioxide are released from microplastic pollution on average. But with EcoPackables, this will improve the production of not only Shein products, but of the third-party suppliers, as it will help worker health in these conditions. As well as this, transportation and the refinement of the products will increase as well. In terms of disposability, due to it being a biodegradable packaging, it will eliminate improper disposal completely, as virgin packaging is a single-use plastic. But with EcoPackables, waste exportation will be canceled completely, and it will allow proper disposal of packaging for Shein products. Thank you so much for your time. I'll be passing this to ethical considerations to my colleague Joaquin.
Perfect, thank you. So far we've been talking about some of the advantages, and I want to just bring us back into some of the more problematic aspects of the company which guide us towards these sort of solutions. Right now, as you guys might be aware, Shein has been put in the spotlight for its labor practices, and I'm sure you guys deal with this every day, but it's important to highlight it because it guides us to the kind of solutions we're providing. If Shein wants to move in and continue to be appealing to its younger audiences, it does have to shift, as well as if it really wants to be the company that it pledges to be with the values it lists. Whether we want to go for the greatest good for the greatest amount of people, reducing CO emissions, causing better air quality for more people, slowing climate change, and reducing plastic incinerations and microplastics, like my partner once said, our solution seems quite advantageous. However, we also believe that if we believe that people have unalienable human rights, our solution is also able to address this sort of ethical consideration, as it would promote the body autonomy of people and promote their livable environment. Not only is our solution ethically advantageous in terms of grand principles, it's also greatly advantageous in terms of business ethics, as it states profitable for the stakeholders and shareholders of the company who might have interest in success, not only financial but also environmental. In conclusion, we believe that our solution is the best we have today in order to address the problem that you guys communicated to us regarding the packaging of that represents the face of your company, that delivers to customers, and we believe that following an implementation plan like the one we provided should guide us into a better future for Shein. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Esteemed judges, who would like to ask the first ethics question?
This isn't an ethics question.
Well, we were asked to start with an ethics question.
I have an ethics question.
Okay.
I think I can ask. You didn't quite mention it, but it looks like the compostable packaging is made from corn. So if it comes from a food source, how do we manage that, the ethics of that? Like, we're using food to make products as opposed to using food to feed people.
Actually, I'm glad you asked about that. We didn't include it in the presentation just because of terms constraints. But something that's really great about EcoPackables as well is that the corn that it uses, the cornstarch actually that it uses to make the bags, comes from disposed corn, so not anything that was going to go into for the consumption of food, but it was actually the remains of things that of the corn industry that were not utilized for food production.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, would you like to jump in?
This is a product question. So is the packaging identical to what we're currently using? Is it waterproof? Does it dissolve in at some period of time? Does it have same tear strength? Is the weight, is that going to affect our shipping costs?
I don't think we're completely sure about all the details in terms of how similar the packaging is. However, its broad usage in the fashion industry does seem to show that there's
So it's
a
an
certain
acceptable
standard.
product already.
Yeah, there's a certain standard that companies like Saks Fifth or Champion probably are using. It's probably not extremely heavy or things that might be a
That's
concern
fine,
to
thank
the
you.
company.
I actually, to just add on to that, about a month ago I did order a package from Saks off Fifth, and it did come with the Eco Packables bag, and it seemed very similar to the ones that Shein
Okay,
used.
good.
I have a question about the packaging also. My understanding of compostable is you have to properly compost the bag for it to have the environmental benefits of being compostable. So my understanding is you can't actually put, for example, compostable packaging in a recycling bin. Is that accurate?
So I'd like to, okay, great question. So from what I've researched about is that the actual problem we're trying to solve is that many companies are using recycled materials, and those bags and recycled materials are actually flying away or going to areas they're not supposed to be at, and then they end up in the ocean. And then our whole point with eco-packables and compostable materials is that if this packaging actually ends up in the nature, it will decompose way faster than plastic materials or recyclable materials. That was the whole idea.
And if it were to be put with actual recycled material, going based off what Andre says, it is going to be a lot of a quicker time frame where it actually decomposes, and it doesn't harm the environment compared to actually 9% of plastic recycled items. They do not. They do get recycled. The other 91% doesn't. And in order for the recycling process to begin, they have to first clean all of those prior recycled items. For example, like a bottle of plastic Coca-Cola. But many do not do that. And if you can't get past phase 1, you're not going to get to phase 2.
Yeah, something as well, just to fill up on their response. It's one of the things like we wanted to focus on the legislation here in the state of California, and SB 54 demands companies to deal with that process of dealing with whether it means recycling the packaging that people use or decomposing it through the compostable materials. And so that part, what we wanted to highlight maybe is to say that like the compostable packaging would actually be even better than the reused plastic, just because reusing reused plastic is not actually a very good solution, whereas like decomposing, it's going to be even better for a company like Shein to deal with the processing that comes at the end of the life cycle of plastic. But even just the microplastics questions, while we were doing our research, we realized that all of us eat like about a credit card every week of microplastics, and so like or even if these packaging, like my friend was saying, end up in the ocean, the fact that they can decompose lead to not that plastic damaging the environment as well as our lives.
Oh well, thank you.
I thought your presentation was very informative. I don't have any questions as a board member. I think they've all been answered already.
Yeah, I can follow up. Just piggybacking on what you said earlier. For the composting, I guess, is there a length of time that it takes to compost? What if it ends up in a landfill in an anaerobic environment where there's no oxygen? I'm more of an engineering science side of it, so I guess if it ends up in the environment, I understand, like you said, like it will break down, decompose. But what if it doesn't end up in the environment, it ends up in in a landfill? Will it still biodegrade or decompose in there?
Well, in theory, we don't really have that information, but it is important to say that if that material ends up in a landfill, that should be treated within the landfill. So I mean, I feel like we were trying to solve the problem if the plastics get away of the landfill or goes to the nature and actually harms the animals. And because as my partner just said, only 9% of all plastics are actually recycled, and a big majority of it actually ends up in the ocean or the forest. And so.
To add to that, when we want to go forth using a compostable item, and let's say it comes to the landfill, and like you mentioned, the use of oxygen actually helps decompose the whole entire process. We don't necessarily, the reason we don't have an answer to that is the same reason why we don't have an answer to why we have so much plastic in landfills and why there's not anything being done about it. We try to make that first step to then be able to get to step 2. So in simple terms, to answer your question, it's better to have a majority percentage of it actually be decomposed and not necessarily benefit the environment, but not harm the environment,
Right.
compared to having that 30%, let's say, or majority percentage actually harming the environment.
Right.
And in terms of the conditions, I apologize.
It's fine. Adding to what my colleague said as well, the corporate responsibility, it is important to note that having a biodegradable product completely changes the help with the checks and balances of the corporate responsibility to dispose of packaging. So even if, again, like you said, it does end up in a landfill, it is the same issue. It is the same result as if it was plastic. But having a biodegradable product allows for that chance to be disposed.
I did have a question. Okay, so I know your
Thank you.
focus is a lot on the product being biodegradable and that process. Have you thought about programs where people would be encouraged to reuse the product and not have it disposed of? I mean, concurrently with what you're doing, because I think there's opportunities there to encourage the consumer to reuse the product, or can the corporation find ways to reuse the product as opposed to disposing of it?
So, just a quick question to that. Are you talking about the product as in the clothing or the product as in the packaging?
The packaging. So I'm one of those people that has a closet full of Amazon packages, and I reuse them. Not everybody does that because that's my, as a consumer, that I would like to find other uses for it. So if I need to send something in the mail, I use one of the packages and reuse it. So that, as opposed to buying new packages, which actually is now it's a cost for me, and also now I'm buying a new package. Now I'm contributing to the problem, I think, because ideally, just not having the packaging in the first place would be ideal, but that doesn't make good business sense, because we have a huge economy, an online economy, and it's thriving and it's very profitable. So the need for this type of packaging is very necessary. So I applaud that. But I just kind of wonder if concurrently programs can be put in place to have consumers reuse a product.
So directly, there aren't any particular programs or regulations. I feel that the United States and other countries are working to start fixing the problem to see what they can do with the solution. And I would say my best answer to that is, I feel a lot of people do the same thing you do. For example, from the state that we are from, grocery bags aren't an extra price. I don't know if it is in California, but I know certain states like Maryland and Washington, D.C.
Or at least
are.
in Los Angeles.
Right, so, I would assume that all of us, including myself, my family, and many other families that I know, when we use that grocery bag, we don't just throw it out. We use it again, put dirty shoes in it or do something with the bag. So we continue to use it, but that doesn't ultimately solve the problem of where does that plastic end up going tomorrow.
Right.
So I guess if that's your question on where it's going to go tomorrow, I do not have an answer for that, because it isn't something actually I personally don't even look to see. I try to recycle it and do the steps that I can take to go in the right process of making sure it doesn't harm the environment, but I cannot speak for other people and say they're going to do the same thing, rather than if they have eco-packables or a compostable bag, for example. It's kind of like a Ziploc bag. You unzip it and you take your product out. people can use that for many different things. I've gotten packages that have similar aspects to them, and I've used it, to put toiletries in them. Now, I don't know how safe it is to put toiletries in it, but I use it, and I'm still here, so.
I understand. Thank you.
So I have a question. So you convinced me, or us, this is a great idea, it's a great presentation. So now I'd like to know how I can do it. You mentioned a wonderful thing, which is the rebate zone for our warehouses that we have. Do you happen to know the warehouse that you showed us? Are we in that zone? Or that might be a nice thing to know in the future.
So I did my research, and I believe it is in the zone of the IMDZ zone for
that's terrific.
Yeah,
Okay,
for
so
the things that the financial
that's a
sector
real
of-
plus.
Yeah.
Also, great idea, but no offense, it's not mandatory until 32. Why am I doing it now? So, it does. Is there a long lead time to start into this? How long? How much ahead of time? How much lead time do I have so I hit the deadline? Could I start it in 2030, which was the date you said that our company is shooting for? Is that enough time?
I think something that we wanted to highlight in our presentation is that we understand that for such a large company, making drastic changes in the supply chain is probably a very difficult process, especially since it's such an international. I know someone mentioned that it delivers to 220 countries, and because it is mainly in China, and then it sends it to other countries, it might be very difficult to make those separations, and without it being a hurdle to say like these packages are going to this region, these packages are going to that region. And so a main advantage of our plan was able to today start the process of understanding how to make that transition without necessarily saying this has to start tomorrow. Even if it starts by the date the legislation takes effect, it would allow a company like Shein to do the process step by step, like we were saying, going first to the infrastructure that you guys already have, which is that recycled plastics, and then moving into compostable plastics in the specific regions, just so you don't have to buy the plastic all everywhere. I think we wanted to focus on taking those step by step, so the supply chain can properly adjust.
Good.
Could you walk me through the math again on the financial aspect of this? If I understood it correctly, that we were going from $1.94 a package to $1.60, so it's actually cheaper to use eco packaging, or did I not get that right?
Yes, that it would be cheaper to use eco-packables.
So it's cheaper than our existing solution.
Right.
So from
And
that
if
What are we
standpoint,
talking about?
Sold.
Yeah.
if you were to be using, more packaging, like basically ordering more units, because you guys obviously ship many packages, then it would even come lower than the $1.60 valuation, because, well, in common knowledge, instead of going more into detail, because you all obviously know this, the more quantity you buy, the odds of the price going lower per package, per unit, is going to be less.
so this chart right here is $14 is the cost of the garment,
It's not the cost, it's the average price.
the average price of the garment.
Right.
And then you're saying 10 to 20% of the price of the garment is typically the packaging price.
Right.
So right now we're between $140 and $280,
That is correct.
and with the eco bag we can bring that down, you're saying, to closer to $160.
Yes, ma'am.
It might be helpful if we had like one typical bag and we could look at the cost of the specific bag rather than an average.
Right.
It just might make it
I
clear.
mean, I think what you're saying is it's going to vary based on volume.
So
Yeah.
actually, for one, so we actually have a picture of the bag, and for one of those, it is above $2.80.
So for one single bag, you're saying buy them by bulk.
Or below, it is right below $2.80. So if you're going to purchase just one bag, if you go on EcoPackable's website, they have many different variety of products. But for the product that we are advertising, it's right below $2.80. and don't quote me because I know it was greater than $2.70. I just do not remember which exact to the cent it was. So it will decrease the price significantly when you get a bulk order. Does that help answer your question, or?
No, what I would like to help would be any typical bag with the cost of the two products are, and then you could even have the different volume points. That's
Right.
really not here or there, but just so we could see a comparison. That would make, particularly if it's
comparison, yeah.
less, I mean, you know, that's great.
I do understand. I agree with what you're saying. I was just trying to answer her
Yeah,
question.
that's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good job.
Mhm.
Okay. I think should we take off our board hats? Do we have any more board related type questions?
Just one more.
Sure.
It's really more just feedback about it, though. I don't know if there's any instructions on composting, like for the consumer, and what they're supposed to do with it. Do they just throw it in their backyard, or do they, like, if there's any instructions on the package, we would like to know how that's marketed, and then also the shelf life of the package. So because if we're shipping it on a boat in a container ship with heat and humidity, across the Pacific or across the Atlantic or whatever, that's all going to play a factor on that compostability, and we don't want the packaging to biodegrade before it gets to the customer. So that's another kind of, I guess, just the quality aspect of the package compared, similar to the cost. We should also do like a quality.
I could tell you
comparison.
stories about packaging that doesn't hold up.
I can tell you too.
that goes back to what the gentleman was saying. We need, 2032 is the year that it's going to be mandated,
Right.
but it's going to take time.
Yes.
Yes.
So why start now? Because you can be well ahead of other companies.
Well, you can save money. It sounds like that's
That's
something
the-
Right, that is the other
Yeah.
aspect
Yeah.
before it
Yeah.
becomes more
Yeah.
popular as well and the price goes up.
Right.
Right.
But we do think they're scalable in terms of that company, Eco-Packables, that they could scale to meet our demand.
For sure.
Yeah, they currently already work with pretty large companies like the ones that we present, and I mean, like Sheen is a huge company, but there is a precedent of working with companies like Nestle. So I think that it is a pretty leading company in the field in terms of packaging solutions.
Okay. Well,
Thank
thank
you.
Thank you
Board
so
thanks
much.
you, and now we shall
Your
put on
research.
our back to our live hats of who we actually are, and give you some constructive feedback and on your presentation. I'd like to kick it off by saying you guys did a great job. You spoke very clearly, and your presentation was well organized, and you hit on the major points that were a part of this exercise. So good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to go and say, yes, spectacular. And you really nailed the environmental and the ethical. And even your presentation assumed that we sort of knew the issues of plastics. So it would be nice to present, like the economic zone, we can benefit from that. The cost of the product, if it's less, I mean, it could have, like, the presentation could have ended at the beginning.
We had 25 minutes.
Yeah, I'll go ahead too. Like, it was a great presentation. I think, the cost, you guys kind of buried the lead on that. Like, that's really what we were focusing on, is like, how can companies find sustainable solutions that also meet our business model and drive that business model. And I think that's really the key term right there is showing like how we can save money, but also do right by the environment. And I think that's really at the core of what like corporate sustainability stands for.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, also to comply with government regulations as well. I think this graphic here, I didn't realize about the advantage of it being cheaper until we got to
Yeah,
this
I think
point.
that you could have
So
delivered that a little bit
think
better
with
in that slide.
Yeah.
When you're talking to a board, they're always gonna be interested in finance.
Yeah.
So including that up front, and then you can explain it more in detail when you get to the slide later in the presentation. But overall, very professional. All of you, you obviously researched the product and knew what you were talking about, as opposed to just kind of reading something or just spitting out something that you might have memorized. I like that you stayed in character in terms of addressing us as the board, and you as in you in the company. I thought that was very effective. I would just redo this, even when you do get to this slide, because I didn't understand it completely. And it's, I'm not sure what that would be. Maybe the visuals would be kind of more dynamic for someone that is not in this industry. So I come from TV. I don't work with consumer products. So I feel like I would just rework this because it's very, very powerful. I didn't get that this with the School 14 was what was inside the bag. Again, if I were working in this industry, if I was on the board, I probably would. But if you have, up front the price and the sustainability, corporate responsibility, reputation is also your brand, and what was the other thing? All up front, and then this is what we're going to talk about. I think you did that. I think you just talk about the price at the front because the board will like that. Because then it's like it's a no-brainer. It's like, oh well, of course we would start now. Because your question was a good one in terms of why start now if the regulations aren't going to be until much later. So this is a good reason to start right now.
But on the other hand, I'm going to talk against myself. I was all upset. I'm thinking, okay, yeah, fine, it's good for the environment. What do I care? It's going to cost me a fortune. I'm not going to qualify for the rebate. And then so I'm having even why should I even start now? I can start and then at the end you can say, but your factory qualifies and it's going to cost you less. It's like,
you could kind of bring home all the positive reasons why to make this switch.
Consume better.
Yeah.
But I'm being very picky, by the way, because I'm just trying to find something to share that you can take with you and think about. But overall, very professional.
And I think my understanding is your next step in this is to focus on the ethical piece of it. So I think that's going to be, important to think through. What is the real heart of the ethical issue here? And I think the ethical issue is plastic. What are plastics doing to our environment? And even if it cost money, and this is kind of the no-brainer situation that it doesn't, but I think that's when the ethical issue becomes even more complex when you have to spend more money to gain the environmental benefit.
Right.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great job.